Hey guys, a few of you have been asking me to talk about practice, so let's talk about practice. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I do to come up with an effective practice routine that I can adapt to different time frames. And it's important to be able to do that because fortunately and unfortunately, there's more to life than simply playing guitar. Meaning you can't spend 8 hours a day practicing guitar every single day of the week for the rest of your life. There will be days where you only have 3 hours, 2 hours, an hour, half an hour to spare. Before I get into the specifics, let me first clarify a few things. 1. Consistency is key. You will improve faster if you practice for 1 hour, 7 days a week than you will if you practice for 7 hours, one day a week. So bear that in mind. 2. You need to set clear goals for what you want to achieve from each part of your practice routine. Don't practice sweep picking or modes just because you've seen other people do that and you think that you should do it as well. Only practice something if it's A, something you want to be better at, or B, something you have to be better at. For example, if you get offered a gig playing solo guitar pieces in a restaurant and you don't know many solo guitar pieces, obviously you're going to have to learn some and you're going to have to practice them. 3. Turn off the notifications on your phone/laptop. Obviously, some people are going to have to use Wi-Fi to access certain practice materials. So the internet is not the enemy here. The enemy is distraction, and distraction can come in various forms. Emails, messages, news updates, etc., etc. Just turn off the notifications on all your social devices and avoid distraction at all costs. And 4, decide what you're going to practice the day before you practice. So at the end of every practice session, you should take a bit of time to reflect on your practice session, maybe even write a short private blog post about your practice, what was good about it, what was bad about it. And once you've done that, work out how much time you have the following day to practice and create a routine that fits around that. I often find that it's much easier to get up and start practicing if I know that I have some sort of rough idea of what it is I'm going to be practicing that day. So it's just one less thing to think about on the day that you will be practicing. Now that we've established those 4 rules to follow when practicing, let's get into the specifics of creating a routine for yourself that you can adapt to different time frames. Now, I'm going to use my own personal goals here as an example, and in no way am I saying that these are things that everyone should practice. I'm not saying that at all. These are just a few things that I know that I want to be better at / consistently good at. So here's a list of 10 things that I want to do in my practice routine. So under technique, I have alternate picking, hybrid picking, and legato. That's 3 things there. For chords, I have more voicings for major 7th, minor 7th, major 6th, and minor 6th. Under scales, we have seeing the melodic minor scale all over the neck, so being able to visualize that scale in any area of the fretboard, and maintaining my visualizations of scales that I am already comfortable with, such as the major scale and the major and minor pentatonic scales. And under improvisation, I have improvising using the melodic minor scale. So those are 10 practice elements there. Now let's say I have 4 hours, 240 minutes to practice those 10 elements. If you divided that time equally between all 10, that would give you 24 minutes per practice element. Some of these definitely do not need 24 minutes spent on them every day, because I know that, for example, if I'm wanting to discover new voicings for a major 6th chord, it's only going to take me about 5 to 10 minutes of looking through one of the many books I have on chord voicings to find a few that I like and can get under my fingers. I'm not going to spend 24 minutes looking at a single chord type. So already I'm thinking I'm going to reduce the amount of time spent practicing chords from around 75 minutes in total down to 40. So that's 10 minutes per chord. As a percentage of my 240 minutes that I've allocated for practice, that works out at roughly 17% of the overall practice time. And from personal experience, I know that I like to practice improvisation over long periods of time, especially if the concept is new to me. It can take a little while to get into the groove of a new scale or whatever other concept it may be that you're using to improvise with. So instead of just spending 24 minutes on improvisation, I'm going to spend an hour and 45 minutes on improvisation. So as a percentage of our 240 minutes, that's roughly 44% of the overall practice time. This leaves me with 95 minutes to spend on technique and scales. So let's lower that to 90 minutes and we'll use the extra 5 minutes as a break, I guess. So that's 45 minutes for technique, 45 minutes for scales. Both of those things can start to get a bit tiresome if you practice them for too long. So rather than practicing running techniques and scales to a metronome for an hour and a half in total, what I'm going to do is combine these two practice elements, practice them simultaneously, and as a result, cut in half the cumulative amount of time that I would spend on practicing both of them separately. This works because I can practice scales using the techniques that I have chosen to work on in my practice routines, such as alternate picking, legato, and hybrid picking. I've mentioned this in other videos in the past, but one method I like to use for practicing scales is by using the circle of fourths to play through a scale in all 12 keys. This is a mental exercise because it forces me to identify root notes all over the fretboard. So again, that's a mental exercise. But when I combine that with techniques such as alternate picking, legato, and hybrid picking, those are all physical exercises. So by combining mental exercises with physical exercises, I can kill two birds with one stone, essentially. And by doing so, I free up more time for other areas of practice. So if I combine those two elements and condense them to 45 minutes, then that works out as roughly 19% of the overall practice time. So 245 minutes minus 45 for scales and technique, 105 for improv, and 40 for chords leaves me with 50 minutes that's left over. So there's a couple of things I could do with that extra 50 minutes. I could add it to improvisation, or I could choose to add in a couple of extra practice elements that have not been previously covered in my routine. However, I will add that I would only add in extra areas of practice if I had 4 hours or longer to work with. If I had less than that, say 3 hours, I feel like that extra time would be better spent working on improvisation instead of cramming in 2 new areas of practice. So let's say I add that extra 50 minutes to improvisation. That means I'm now spending 155 minutes practicing improvisation, 2 hours and 35 minutes. That works out at roughly 65% of my time. So using exact percentages, the 4 hours are now made up of 64.58%, which is spent on improvisation, 18.75% spent on scales and technique combined, and 16.66% spent on chords. To apply this to a larger or smaller amount of time, you can use these percentages to work out exactly how many minutes you should spend on each section of your practice routine. Say for 2.5 hours, that's 150 minutes. Using these percentages, that would mean that I would spend roughly 95 minutes on improvisation, 28 minutes on scales and technique, you could round that up to half an hour, 25 minutes on chords. Now I know that all of these decimal point percentages might seem a bit extreme, and they are. I'm not suggesting that you stick to them religiously. The point I'm making here is that by calculating each part of your practice routine as a percentage of time, you can easily adapt your practice routine to different days where you might have more or less time to practice. And the other point I'm making here is that you can free up more time in your practice routine by combining certain elements of your practice routine. So for example, I combine technique practice with scale practice. I practice them together, which in turn cuts in half the amount of time I have to spend practicing both of them. There's a lot more that I could add to what I've already said about making the most of your practice time. So I'm just going to throw in a few extra observations that I have made over the years. Imagine you've got a week where you have 5 days in a row that you can practice for, let's say, 2 to 3 hours every day. And on the 6th day, you only have 20 to 30 minutes. Your first thought's probably going to be, How can I possibly apply my 2 to 3 hour time percentage method to such a short time frame? You would be correct in thinking that there'd be little point in doing that because it would be really, really hard and also a bit pointless trying to cram in so much practice into such a short time frame. So what you can do instead is what I would call technical maintenance with a bit of jamming at the end. So what I would do on a day like that is I would run through some scales, do some technical exercises just to get the blood flowing in my fingers and keep building muscle memory because that's important to do. And then at the end, say for 5 to 10 minutes, I would just improvise over a backing track. That's all I would do. You don't want to try and cram in too much on a day like that where you've got a really limited amount of time to practice. And don't worry about that because there are going to be days in the future where you'll have a lot more time to practice. Really what I'm trying to say here is that it's important to avoid skipping any practice days. Even if you've only got 5 minutes, just pick up your guitar and run through some technical exercises. Alternatively, if you want to practice for longer, let's say 8 hours, you'll probably want to add in more bits and pieces to your practice routine. So instead of practicing improvisation with the melodic minor scale for 5 hours, add in some more improvisational concepts that you could practice as well. So even though the time percentage method that I've just explained is useful, you should always be thinking about whether or not you're really making the most of your practice time. Simply taking a 4-hour routine and doubling the amount of time spent on each thing for an 8-hour routine is not really the most effective use of your practice time. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to find new techniques and concepts to practice, but you could find some additional materials to add to what's already in your routine. For example, if I'm practicing alternate picking in a 4-hour routine and I want to do an 8-hour practice routine, I'm not just going to take the same exercises in my 4-hour routine and simply practice them for twice as long. What I'm going to do is try and find some other exercises, some additional ones that I can add to what I'm already doing so that I'm actually filling out that extra time usefully. Okay, final thing, breaks. You're going to want to take some. There is research out there claiming that us humans can only concentrate on certain chunks of information for up to 45 minutes before our brains sort of cease to absorb any further information. So every 40 to 45 minutes, I recommend just taking a short breather, putting your guitar down, getting out of your practice room, going and drinking some water or some tea or some coffee. And then once you've done that, just come back in and get back to it. Oh, I've been talking for a long time. Okay, there's a million other things that I could have said in this video, and I probably will make more practice related videos in the future. But for now, if you found this video helpful, please let me know. And if you think there are better methods out there for practicing guitar, please also let me know by dropping a comment below. I'm really always interested to hear about how other musicians practice. I find it fascinating. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and click subscribe for more.